Welcome to Human Resources Management, Lecture 6A. We're going to complete our discussions on unions today. So if you recall from the last class, we talked about the different types of unions that are out there. We talked about, the business type union, a predatory union, a friendly union. So we gave the different types of union, predatory and also revolutionary, where we used the example of Solidarity, La Fulenza, and the Polish revolutionary union. So we're going to continue on to sort of round out this discussion because they do play a pretty big role in a lot of industries and sectors, and they do have an impact how you manage your people. One of the things that you really need to understand is whatever the collective agreement is that you're working under. And remember, the collective agreement is the contract between the union and the employer. It's also really helpful, I think, for individuals to understand why an employee might vote for a union. And that way, if I'm a company, you can sort of be proactive about it instead of being reactive about it and try to do things that would not want your employees to want to vote for a union. Doesn't mean they still might not, but it's for sure if they're disgruntled, there's a much higher likelihood if a union is trying to certify itself within your employee group. So that can be helpful to ensure that you don't create those conditions that would make them want to join a union. Now, there's always these factors that might lead an employee to support a union. The four factors here: personal, workplace, economic, and societal. Personal factors, how they grew up. If the family was all working with a big company and the company was unionized, you probably heard a lot of things at the dinner table about unions and the advantages and that sort of thing. Definitely if you were blue collar, unions tended to up the wage rates of blue collar into the middle class sector as opposed to having minimum wages. So definitely had a positive role in that area. And if instrumentality, if we talk about Vroom, if you believe that by voting for a union you're going to get these certain results, then that can go a long way in making you want to unionize. Obviously, compensation, that's, if you believe that you can get a much better rate of compensation by unionizing. And I think you should consider all the costs of unions too, though. There's union dues, there's the cost of strikes and other things that play into this. So you have to look at the big picture. Comparative industries, is your industry mostly unionized? And if it is, then it's got a bigger opportunity, or usually it's easier to unionize in those sectors where it's already been well established. And of course, in the workplace, if management is doing things that are dissatisfying the employees in a big way, that's a good reason why employees might want to vote for a union. Union attitudes of management will tend to not to change the workers' view. However, management's view of unions can backfire. So, if you have a union that's marketing itself to you and trying to unionize your company, that might not change your attitude that much. But if management is kind of pushing, don't vote for a union, bad, this will happen, these are all negative things, and kind of threatening you, probably that could leave a bad taste in a lot of employees' mouths, and that could potentially backfire for companies that try those kind of tactics. Organizational structures may increase or decrease the support depending on how the company is organized. Is it a multi-layer dog-eat-dog type of company, or is it more flat, lean, and big happy family type of structure? Economic factors, unemployment rates, fear of what might happen if you unionize. Is this company easy to move, an offshore? If there could be a lot of economic factors that are tying to that. So there's risk, there's balance of power that we've talked about that can have influence there. And then there's the societal factors. As I mentioned in the last class, depending on where we are, if it's a recession or if it's boom times, is there kind of a pushback against union by all the non-unionized workers? Remembering looking at the stats that we looked at in the last class, the majority is non-unionized, so that means that they'll have a bigger influence in media and communication and those types of things. So that definitely can play a role on how much support and how much willingness there is to certify a union. And trends, what are the more recent trends? So there are different requirements, and these requirements change all the time. So you have to always look if things have changed or if they haven't changed. But the federal government requires, if it's a federal union, the majority of employees in proposed bargaining unit for consideration of certification. So over 50% support's required for automatic certification. The Ontario government requires 40% support for certification application to be considered, and then there is no automatic certification. So they look at it on a case-by-case basis. So there's a little bit of difference there, but it is relatively possible to become unionized in both examples. Collective bargaining. So that's the process that starts when both sides spell out their demands. And it's kind of a longer process. It's not something that's done in a few days. It can, if you have a 4-year union agreement, maybe in the last year coming up to renegotiating, they'll start having meetings to sort of set down what the requirements are and to try to start laying out the schedule for bargaining. And in Ontario, upon certification, a notice must be given to the employer from the union to start that bargaining within 90 days before the expiry of the agreement or in accordance with the collective agreement. The parties must agree within 15 days from the giving of the notice or within such period as the parties agree upon. Because if you don't put some sort of time limit, the company might just keep pushing it off and pushing it off. So if the union has been certified, you have to sit down and start bargaining as a company with that union. You can't just sort of keep throwing it off and we'll never get to bargaining. So there's requirements in the legislation. What will be bargained for? These are some examples that are typical: wages, benefits, working hours, procedures for hiring, promotion, working conditions. It depends what's going on, what the balance of power is. In boom times, wages and benefits become very popular. If it's maybe a recession, maybe you might agree to a shorter work week, less hours. Instead of getting a raise, there could be different things that could be negotiated. Procedures for hiring, promotions, who's eligible, usually based on seniority. All of these things might be what the employee members are asked if they're interested in. And how do they ask? They ask by conducting surveys, having meetings, discussions, and follow up that way. So employee surveys are really important. If there's a union survey, it's well worth your time to take the survey because that will feed into what they prioritize. So if most of the members are not interested in benefits, but they're interested in wages, then that's going to be the top priority for the next round of negotiations. Historical bargaining, they'll look at past agreements. What did they get? What didn't they get? Where's the starting point for this? Is this the right opportunity to try to go after something that they've been seeking for a long time? Both sides basically do that, management and the union. Comparative collective agreements, like in the auto sector, the union will target one auto manufacturer. Usually they'll target the most successful one that's doing really, really well, so that can sort of set the bar for the others to follow as far as wage rates. So they usually target that and compare collective agreements in that sector. And often even like college teachers, they compare the pay rates in high schools and university professors. And if university professors are at 150,000 and college high school teachers are at 100,000, then they might be looking for somewhere in between, as an example. So Grievances, where are grievances most commonly occurring? So that means there's a problem in the previous collective agreement. It's not clear enough, and it's a gray area, and then you're spending a lot of time and effort on these grievances. Usually both parties want to settle these and clarify them because they don't want to spend a lot of money in the upcoming years, again, having these gray areas and sort of duking it out. Problem is, what management wants and what the union wants are probably two entirely different things. So then it's a point for negotiation, and either side might not want to budge. Environmental conditions, economic conditions, how are we with inflation rates, labor market demographics? Do we have a lot of available free labor that we can tap into? Is there a lot of inflation going on? And if we have a lot of people available, does that mean the economy is not running that smoothly? So those are other things that will pay into or play into the actual negotiation process. So inevitably, when you negotiate, you have bargaining in good faith and you have bargaining in bad faith. And so the parties are expected to, from a legislative point of view, bargain in good faith. Honest bargaining, that means that you're entering it with good faith that you're going to try to seek out an agreement. And both parties are expected to go into it with the intention of reaching an agreement. It's not that you're bargaining to have a strike. You should be going in to avoid a strike or to avoid a lockout. There's usually not too much detail in the legislation exactly how both sides should bargain, because they should be able to figure out what way works best. So some things are left intentionally blank or not detailed in the legislation so that it leaves flexibility for the parties to determine how they want to do the bargaining. Bad faith bargaining is a refusal to bargain or refusing to provide a rationale for a bargaining position. That would be you go into the negotiations and you want a 5% raise as the union, and these are the reasons: because of inflation, because we didn't get the proper raise the last agreement, because it was a recession. They might have a whole bunch of reasons, and management just says, no, we're not doing that. No logic, no reasons, no justification behind it. That's not considered to be bargaining in good faith. Surface bargaining, so just playing games with no intention of really reaching an agreement, going through the motions, and that lead to a strike because you feel that you have the upper hand maybe over the union, so you're not really bargaining in good faith. Then there is this example that we call Bulwarism, and it's named after the vice president of General Electric, whose last name was Bulwar. He used this method in the late 1940s and 1950s, and he was actually quite successful at it in the 1940s and 50s. So he would present an offer to the union, and he would say, this is our first offer, this is our best offer, this is our last offer. So take it or leave it. Well, that's not bargaining at all. Where Bulwar was kind of successful, he kind of went behind the union's back, and he actually had General Electric survey the employees and figure out what they wanted from GE's perspective instead of listening to the union, trying to undermine the union. And then they actually did put together reasonably good offers, but they just didn't want to have any negotiations or parts. They know where they wanted to finish, and so they wanted to dictate the terms of the agreement. So they actually managed to get a number of wins that the members, even though the union wouldn't recommend it, the members would actually vote for it, which kind of undermined the union to a certain extent, which was considered bad faith bargaining from that perspective. I find the Bulwar case kind of interesting because he's, kind of a single-minded, directed individual. And at the time, Ronald Reagan, a future president for the United States, was doing a lot of consulting with General Electric. He was doing presentations and speeches, motivational speeches, trying to get the workers, pumped up and engaged about their work. And at the time, he was a Democrat, and by the time he finished working with Bulwar, he was a Republican. So there might have been some influences there from Bulwar on that. And it was interesting that Ronald Reagan, in his tenure as president, when the air basically the airport workers, that flight controllers went on strike, he legislated them back to work, saying it was an essential service. And they said they weren't going to go back to work. And he said, if you don't go back to work, you're going to get fired. And so about 10,000 of them didn't go back to work. I believe that's the number. You can check it yourself. It's well publicized from the time period. And he fired them all. They thought there was no way that he could fire them, because who's going to land all the planes if they all got fired? But Reagan was actually able to bring the military in to take that role until they trained up new people. So that was a very interesting kind of confrontation with that. But it was deemed an illegal strike because they were legislated back to work. So that gave them the power to actually fire them. So you have to watch what the rules and the regulations are, because if you're doing something that is illegal, even as a union, and you're not following what you're supposed to be doing, then that could be very, very bad for the memberships. So the stages of negotiation kind of go through these areas. Pre-negotiation, and pre-negotiation priorities, goals, they're determined. We talked about the surveys. There's some informal meetings a long way out from when the contract is expired. So these negotiations, they take place, maybe 10 months, 8 months, a year before the actual contract is up. And usually that'll kind of give you a range. The employees want a 5% wage rate, and the employer wants to give a 1% rate. So you got kind of a range in there. And of course, the employer keeps it probably lower, and the union keeps it probably higher than they expect. And we know that then there's a narrowing between the parties over time. When you're far out from the actual contract date, there's no real urgency to settle things. And so as it approaches closer to the contract expiring, then there is a crisis where there's a threat for a strike or a lockout. Usually the membership will vote on whatever management's offer is. Depending what your legislation is, which province you're in, it may be mandatory that management can call for a vote by the employees. So the union might say, no, we're not giving this to our employees to vote on. But management can request that they actually do make it something that they vote on. And then usually the union will say to the employees, don't vote for this, vote against it. And then they really look at the numbers. If 97% vote against it, management knows that the union is fully backed by the employees. On the other hand, if 62% vote for it, that's not a very strong case. So they might be more willing to hold out, because they figure if they go on strike, the membership will cave more quickly and force the union to accept an offer. So there's kind of this playing gamesmanship that goes on through the process. It's also why you will see very often, the collective agreement is up by midnight tonight, and if it's not settled, we're going to go on strike. Usually, very often, it doesn't get settled till like 11 o'clock at night. One side blinks or one side caves, and it's usually depending on thing, or one side offers up that little bit extra, and that's enough for the other side not to lose face and to accept it. Because also there gets to be egos involved and a whole bunch of other things in this process. Striker, with regards to replacement workers are typically not a great thing. So in some areas it's done a fair bit. Some southern states, the company will hire people to replace people that are on strike. That usually leads to violence, because the striking employees are outside. They have to bring in the replacement workers through the gates, and that's usually the opportunity to have a lot of violence there, because the workers are on strike, so they feel that there's no crisis on management's side. If management's able to continue to run the factory and have the workers there, they're wasting their time and they're losing their money, and they're getting very, very upset. And some people have mortgages and families to feed and all that sort of thing. So it gets to be very emotional. So if you're thinking about replacement workers as a company, it's probably not a great idea, because that would lead to a lot of animosity. And even when the strike gets settled and people are back to work, it takes a long time for people to heal along those ways. Uh, I'm a college professor as well as teaching at University of Toronto, so we had a strike not that long ago. And I can tell you there was a lot of faculty that were pretty upset for a long period of time about things that way. So they really kind of took it to heart. I found I didn't actually march on the picket line. It's kind of not my thing, but the faculty that did, I think that all of that walking on the line, talking about it all day long for about 5 weeks, really sort of made them really, really militant and upset. So I can only imagine if you hired replacement workers and the animosity that would be built up over time, that would be a problem. So this is sort of wrapping up our discussion. We'll have more discussions on this when we meet live in the synchronous portions. But here's a few discussion questions for you to sort of think about before we get into discussions. I think actually some of these questions are going to come up on the other part. So actually, don't worry about these questions for now. We'll actually deal with these questions on the next part, on part 6B. You can look them over, but wait till you look at the lecture 6B, and then we can have that as part of our discussions in the synchronous part of the class. So have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon in class. Bye for now.